How can you say that you're not responsible? What does it have to do with me? So we all know that Esteban Ocon was wrongfully dropped for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Well, not really wrongfully. He decided to get dropped so that he can do the test for Haas, which makes sense. And he had a special helmet prepared for his last race with Alpine, and he also wasn't included in their last ever team photo. Oh my gosh. I don't know why people hate Esteban Ocon so much. I like Ocon. He's a really good driver. Maybe it's because of his demeanor with his teammates on track, fair enough, but he's also one of the nicest drivers off the track. Just ignore that he ignored me. It's fine, it's whatever. But this made me realize that Alpine / Team Enstone, in their history, have always been screwing over drivers like this, and we're gonna go through all of them today. Well, 2000 onwards actually is where most of my knowledge comes from, and I also don't have to research a lot. And I'll try to keep this video as unbiased as possible because, to put it lightly, I hate Team Enstone. Not any of the drivers. In fact, all of the drivers have been really likable. It's just their management which I hate, and their management has always been this shady ever since the 2000s. So here we go with the first driver we're going to be talking about. Thomas the Train, or as most of you know him, Jarno Trulli. In 2001, Jarno was driving for Jordan and finished P10 in the championship with 9 points. 9 points for P10. Well, to be fair, you only receive points if you're in the top 6 in this era. And for 2002, he was picked up by Renault. He was paired alongside Jenson Button for the 2002 season, and he finished in P8, right behind Jenson by 5 points. But in the following season, Jarno Trulli retained his Renault seat, and Jenson Button went to BAR Honda. And in 2003 was actually a good season, unlike 2002, like as a whole. Because 2002 is one of the most boring F1 seasons of all time. You thought 2023 was bad? 2002 was a nightmare. Because 2003 had 7 different race winners, one of them being Jarno Trulli's teammate, Fernando Alonso. Yes, Trulli in 2003 was paired alongside future 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso, and he got convincingly beaten in the standings by 22 points. And it might not seem like a lot, but if we convert them to today's point system, Alonso beats Trulli by 50 points. And the championship doesn't go down to the wire. Michael Schumacher wins it in Indianapolis, but that's not important to today. Now, everything I've been saying so far will make you think that Jarno Trulli was rightly eventually dropped by Renault because he's been outclassed by all of his teammates who are relatively inexperienced compared to him. I mean, in 2004, he's been in F1 for 8 years at this point, or 7. One of those. But after getting a double podium in Spain and Monaco and actually winning the Monaco Grand Prix, ignore Fernando Alonso had a crash with Ralf Schumacher. Jarno Trulli went on to stay ahead of Fernando Alonso up until the Italian Grand Prix. Because the Italian Grand Prix is the race where he was dropped by Renault, and he missed the next race in China, and he drove for Toyota in the final 2 races of the season, and Fernando Alonso eventually finished ahead of him in the standings. And Jacques Villeneuve was Jarno Trulli's replacement. Just ignore how great he did. This is honestly one of the greatest F1 performances of all time. But I'll be fair to Renault and why they dropped him. His relationship with Briatore was melting faster than butter left in room temperature, so it makes sense to why Renault dropped Trulli. But you know, at least let him complete the season. He was actually about to finish ahead of Fernando Alonso, but also ignore Alonso was unlucky throughout the season. It's whatever. Jarno probably would have finished ahead of Alonso anyways, so yeah, he was kind of screwed over by Renault. And Trulli ended up driving for Toyota full-time from 2005 to 2009, and he actually got a decent amount of podiums here and there. A pole position at the American Grand Prix. Yes, that American Grand Prix. And maybe he would have won the 2009 Australian Grand Prix if Brawn weren't so quick. And he ended off his career in the worst way possible. Driving for Caterham / Team Lotus / General Electric, but somehow they're the slowest team in 2013. I'm going to do a demotion scale where I rank all of these from 1 to 10. 1 being, yeah, it makes sense why you dropped them. 10 being, why on earth did you do that? That's just being ridiculous. So I'm going to have to give this one a 5. His relationship with Renault is getting salty, but at least let him complete the season. And next is Nelson Piquet Jr. I don't even think I really need to say much for this. Yes, it's a 10 out of 10 on how rude or how harsh this was, because they asked him to crash on purpose so he can keep his seat for next season, and they dropped him mid-season for Romain Grosjean. And funnily enough, Grosjean did do the same crash as Piquet did, but on the race it was during free practice. They kind of ruined Nelson Piquet's career after that, because no one would trust him ever again, and he ended up jumping around in different motorsport series and did okay in NASCAR. I forgot how he did in Formula E. So, yeah, this is a 10 out of 10, and I think everyone agrees with this, and we don't need to revisit the whole thing. Next, Nick Heidfeld. I remember in the F1 Academy video, I said the most underrated award was for Maya Vug, and I called it the Nick Heidfeld Award, and because I think he's one of the more underrated F1 drivers of all time. But we won't talk about him being underrated in today's video. We're gonna get into that in another video. But for now, we're gonna talk about how he was screwed over by Team Enstone. I'll be fair to Team Enstone, Renault, Lotus, or whatever they were called this year. It was really confusing in 2011, but I'll be fair to this team first. Heidfeld wasn't even supposed to drive for them at first because the seat was originally meant for Kubica and Petrov, a continuation of their 2010 lineup, but then we all know what happened to Robert Kubica and had a tragic rally crash. And he ended up coming back 6 years later to do a test with Renault as well, so that was pretty cool. But it's not about Robert Kubica today. Nick drove for Renault from the Australian Grand Prix up until the British Grand Prix. From the German Grand Prix onwards, he was replaced by Bruno Senna. And to start the year, Nick was actually doing a very, very decent job, getting a podium in the second race in Malaysia. Well, to be fair, Vitaly Petrov also got a podium in the first race in Australia, and come the British Grand Prix, he was easily ahead of his teammate 31-34 in the championship. And as I said earlier, from the German Grand Prix onwards, Bruno Senna came in to replace Nick Heidfeld. Yes, the nephew of legendary driver Ayrton Senna, and it was pretty cool to see him in Lotus GP colors, or Team Lotus. I don't know what they were called in 2011, but he wore the same colors as his uncle did. And how did he do?
However, the literal noun form of "this is a picture of shit."
And if we look at the constructor standings, it didn't really cost them anything. Mercedes scored double the points they had, but it was such a ridiculous move to bring in Bruno Senna, and it even further showed in the next year, 2012, when he drove for Williams and was decimated by Pastor Maldonado. But to be fair, Pastor was a decently quick driver on one lap pace. And I guess there was something wrong between Heidfeld and Lotus internally, or Renault and Enstone, whatever they were called. Again, I genuinely don't understand their partnership back in 2011. It's honestly one of the most confusing things ever in F1. Even more confusing on Ferrari's strategy at the British Grand Prix earlier this year. So I'm going to have to give this an 8 out of 10 on the demotion scale. It was a ridiculous move, but then it didn't really cost them a lot in the end. So they may as well got rid of him. So yeah. Next is Kimi Raikkonen. Did you know that Kimi Raikkonen nearly made Lotus bankrupt and Lotus still owes him $13.5 million? Yes, you see this every single winter and summer break, and this time I actually haven't seen any on Instagram or Twitter or on Reddit, so I'm going to be the one bringing in this fact that you see every single time. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. He did bring in 2 wins for Lotus, so he definitely did deserve that money, and he didn't even finish the 2013 season because he had back issues, and Heikki Kovalainen replaced him for the final few races. Well, this worked out for Kimi in the end because he was able to move to Ferrari, and Lotus had to bring in Pastor Maldonado. Yeah, remember the nuclear fallout that was F1 social media when Pastor Maldonado and Roman Grosjean were driving for the same team? To be fair, in this era, Grosjean wasn't really that much of a Taki Inoue compared to 2012, but Pastor Maldonado was still the Pastor Maldonado we all know and adore. And the next driver is Jolyon Palmer. Now, Jolyon was poo, to say the very least. As a driver, as an analyst, I enjoy him a lot. So apologies, Jolyon, if you're watching this, but everyone can admit you are not that great of a driver. And there were only 2 races where he ended up scoring points: the 2016 Malaysian Grand Prix and the 2017 Singapore Grand Prix. And if you compare his performances to his teammates, yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory to why he was dropped. And yeah, he was dropped at the 2017 Japanese Grand Prix for Carlos Sainz, which was the best decision Renault could have made. So this isn't really that harsh. So on the demotion scale, I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 10. Or actually a 0 out of 10. This was very reasonable. Look how far off the pace he was at the 2017 Australian Grand Prix. Next, Nico Hulkenberg. Nico was dropped in 2019 after Daniel Ricciardo was outperforming him for an entire year, and he was replaced by Esteban Ocon for the 2020 season. Now you might think this was reasonable because Ricciardo did outperform him by a lot in 2019, but you're gonna get rid of Hulkenberg. the guy who's been carrying your back for 2 years, 2017, 2018, just because he had one bad season, makes total sense. And this decision to drop Hulkenberg ultimately caused him, yes, it caused Hulkenberg a podium and a possible race win. Because Ocon got a podium in the 2020 Secure Grand Prix and Ocon won the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix. And just a friendly reminder that this was Nico Hulkenberg's replacement. So I forever rate Team Enstone for this, and I'm going to give this a 15 out of 10. And the funny thing is, out of Nico, Daniel, and Esteban, Nico is probably the best driver out of all of them right now. So look how well this ended for you, Renault, or Team Enstone. Next, we have the 2022 Alpine Inter-Team Implosion. Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon were clashing too much throughout the season, and Ocon was pretty much just blocking Alonso every chance he could. So I guess that's why people hate Esteban Ocon, but he's still a really good driver. And Alonso got fed up with this and ended up leaving for Aston Martin after Sebastian Vettel announced his retirement. And there was an open seat. So obviously they're going to pick up their junior, Oscar Piastri, and they announced it on Twitter. And Oscar Piastri made a follow-up tweet saying that they never came to a formal agreement and would therefore not be driving for Team Enstone for the 2023 season. And looking at the situation now, Team Enstone got finessed big time because it played off brilliantly in the hands for Piastri and Alonso. Piastri has 2 wins under his belt with McLaren now, as well as 2 sprint wins, and Fernando Alonso had a really good season with Aston Martin in 2023. Same can't be said about 2024 though, but he still finished ahead of both Alpine drivers. So on the demotion scale, I'm going to have to give this a 50 out of 10 for Team Enstone because you got rid of a possible future generational talent and good experience to have on your team, because you are very poor at management. Now, after the 2023 Belgian Grand Prix, Otmar Safnauer was let go by Team Enstone, and yeah, this just further proved that they have no clue what they're doing in the management office. And lastly, Esteban Ocon. We already went through this in the intro, so I'm just gonna rate this on the demotion scale. It's a 5 out of 10 because he did opt to not race for Alpine in the final race of the season so he can do the Haas test. So yeah, and just look at the Bahrain and Abu Dhabi pictures. Just a friendly reminder that this is Jack Doohan's debut, by the way. And I also remember reading some rumors in October that Briatore only gave Jack Doohan a 5-race contract for next year to see if they want to keep him or sign Franco Colapinto. So you can tell that Flavio Briatore is back in full force. But hopefully this is just a rumor and they give Doohan the chance to complete the whole season next year. But then again, you have to consider that it's Flavio Briatore, the man who didn't care if one of his drivers crashed on purpose just so that the other can win the Grand Prix. So that will do it for today's video. Let me know if you want to see a similar video but with Red Bull. But you know, recently Red Bull haven't really been doing anything wrong with their driver management. I actually think it's been pretty good. So maybe not. But yeah, be sure to like and subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and hopefully this video inspired you guys to join the Team Enstone hate train.